Hello and welcome to episode number 164 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. For today's episode, we've got the full complement of tanks. I'm sure our listeners are happy to hear. We've got Kel in the red tank.
Hello.
Neil in the orange tank.
Hello.
And Christina the blue tank.
Hello.
That's right. We are in full force for today's topic.
Full bloom.
Full bloom. Full complement. We've got the entire squadron. No, it's not a squadron. What is the...
Battalion?
Battalion, right?
Yeah, I think that works. A battalion of tanks.
Battalion. Yep. There you go. Perfect.
What do you guys know about war?
Everything.
War never changes.
War is hell.
That's
War.
right.
What is it good for?
And a new one comes out every November.
Our topic for today came to me
In a dream.
in a dream, as they always do, with the vaccine sort of starting to...
Vaccinate.
Yeah, start to vaccinate. It's fulfilling its ultimate purpose to vaccinate. But as it's spreading around the country and as we think there may be a light at the end of the tunnel, I was, starting to get excited about getting back to in-person gaming and all that kind of stuff. And it made me think of getting out of our comfort zones. Times that we've been outside our comfort zones, things in the hobby that are sort of outside our comfort zones that we might have interest in, and just getting out of our comfort zone in general. And so that's going to be today's topic. Getting out of your comfort zone. But before we get into that topic, we are going to be talking about the games we've played. Kellen and Christina are going to be talking about Lord of the Rings Confrontation. I'll follow that up with my play of Reavers of Midgard. And Neelan will close us out with his play of Paleo. So, Christina and Kellen, tell us about the Lord of the Rings. Neelan, do sound effects.
Bum, 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 bum.
So Christina and I watched all 3 extended editions of the 4K Blu-ray of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And then we argued about it on Patreon. And in our Patreon Discord channel where everyone disagrees with me.
I gotta say something. I haven't been keeping up with that, but if you are a fan, or if you have an opinion, I think is better, about anything related to the Lord of the Rings movies, you have to get into our Patreon and go to the Discord Patreon channel because it is crazy in there. I do not have an opinion, so I've stayed away from it, but I can tell just by dipping my toe in once in a while that it is just blazing in there.
Let's get straight to it. Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, is a Reiner Knizia, yes, the only true and living doctor, took some inspiration from J.R. Tolkien and improved upon the mythos and created Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation. This game is long out of print. It is kind of expensive to acquire, and it's pretty similar to essentially a Lord of the Rings Stratego, which also exists, funnily enough. But Christina and I had a great time watching all the movies, and we thought, hey, we should play a board game to sort of celebrate ending the trilogy. And when one of the games is from Reiner Knizia, that's the one I'm going to want to check out. So it is an asymmetrical game where one player is playing as the Fellowship, Frodo, Sam, the whole crew, the other hobbits that no one cares about, Gimli, Legolas.
Should we pause and you can give your ranking of all of the Fellowship?
Oh yeah, Christina and I were talking about ranking the whole Fellowship. And putting Frodo in the F tier.
Kellen
just to annoy
wants to
people.
Put Frodo in the F tier.
He doesn't do anything. F tier for Frodo. Who was in the S tier? I couldn't remember. I can't remember.
You put Boromir.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in the S tier.
Yeah, Boromir's the only one in the S tier, just to piss people off. Anyway, that is what I dream about, Mark, unlike you. In Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, someone plays as Sauron and sort of the minions of Sauron, including, Nazgul, Black Riders, Saruman, and a bunch of different characters. And you set up the board so the good player starts in the Shire, and the bad player starts in Mordor, and the good player is trying to move Frodo to Mordor. If Frodo makes it to Mordor, that player wins. If Frodo dies, Sauron wins. And if 3 of the bad characters also make it to the Shire, they also win the game. The interesting premise is that every turn you must move forward. And if you can't move forward, you lose the game. So each space in the board has a certain amount of players that can be there. It is Stratego-like in that you don't know where any of the 9 characters are of your opponent. So when you move a character onto their space, you're initiating a combat, but you don't know what you're in for. And then you have a hand of 9 combat cards that you will use, and each person will play one face down, flip them over, and add their character value with the value of the card, and that person will win the battle. It's very, very, very straightforward, except every character has a special ability that is thematically linked to the movie. Well, to the movie. That's going to piss some people off. That's my goal here, is to just anger real Lord of the Rings fans, of which I am not, despite having read the series multiple times. This amounts to really, really cute things. I am not a thematic gamer, but it's sort of like if Sam is with Frodo, his strength is increased. So if you see two people on the Fellowship side, you're kind of like, I think that's Frodo and Sam. It got to the point where Christina, as the Fellowship, was very spread out across the board, except in the back, there were just two people chilling there. And I'm just like, well, which one's Frodo and which one's Sam? And she bursts into laughter. I think, Christina, having never played Stratego, had not really connected all the dots in terms of like, oh, this is really more about bluffing than it is about any like grand genius or strategic insight.
So on our subsequent play...
Yes, what did you do, Christina, on our subsequent play?
Outsmarted Kellen.
Okay.
Not much to brag about there, to be honest.
And it was the most satisfying, well, not the most satisfying. It was a satisfying thematic experience because my characters, one by one, sacrificed themselves, and it got to the point where at the very end of the game, Kellen and I both had one card in our hand left, and Frodo was the only person of mine left on the board, and he was like one step away from Mordor, and I won't say what happened next, but it was not
He
good
died.
for the Fellowship.
Frodo died.
But thematically, it was just, I personally am a thematic gamer. I love getting immersed in the theme. And this was especially immersive. It just felt so fun to inherently understand what all of the characters' powers were because we literally just watched 12 hours of this. And it felt like I had like an emotional... Honestly, I was more upset. The games we played were very short. This game is straightforward. And I was very, very emotionally invested and upset because I really felt like I was letting the Fellowship down,
For example, she almost rage quitted the first game when I strategically placed my Balrog in a certain area. The Fellowship is able to move through the Mines of Moria, but if a Balrog is stationed in one specific area, he kills anyone that travels through there. And so on the first turn of the game, or on the second turn of the game, I believe she tried to go through these mines.
He
and
didn't
was
tell me.
extremely upset.
He didn't tell me that
Extremely
that
upset
was even possible. He didn't tell me that
when
I
the
should...
Balrog was revealed.
This was like
Have you seen the films?
This was like let's just start playing. You don't need to read what all of my characters' powers are.
He's a
And
big
then
fire dragon.
The very first thing, he's like, oh, you didn't know that was my character's power?
You got.
Oh my God. I was so mad. It was a learning game and I learned a lot, and then I came back and gotcha later.
Someone needs to read their character references.
It was really, really fun.
I think this is delightful. I think that it is super buoyed by the theme, but Stratego-like gameplay is something that I've always enjoyed, even as a kid, sort of playing Stratego. And this has two full sets of characters. So you have a classic game and then a variant game with 9 other new additional characters. The immediate thought I had was that, like, this is the game that Neelan and I would play the morning of a Barrage Con before other people wake up. And we're just kind of goofing off. It's got Reiner Knizia. It doesn't feel exactly like a Reiner Knizia game to me, but the math is there in terms of the cards, and it's an open discard pile. So you're really like, okay, they can't play the 6, so I could beat them with this special card, but not that card, and I could tie them with the 4. Very delightful little game. I am happy to own it. It is extremely hard to recommend to people because it is extremely expensive, but it has sent me down another rabbit hole, which is that Don Eskridge of Resistance fame also made a Stratego game the other year, a couple years ago, that I've been trying to find called Spies and Lies, a Stratego story. And you can't find this game, so I'm probably going to have to buy an expensive secondary copy to try this Stratego variant, but I will do that before this episode releases, so none of you idiots out there can buy it before me. I think the hard thing is that it really is helped a lot by the theme. The game is extremely straightforward, except every character is an exception,
Right.
And so having the reference is integral, and then knowing the film is even better, and like the exceptions become cute, and it's short enough and light enough that I'm okay with it. But this would not be one that I would immediately try to sort of re-theme into Splatoon land and then make it more wildly available for everybody.
Right.
And you get the sense, because it's so fast and light and quick, that you would be able to internalize those exceptions fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Especially with the theme, I guess, helping.
Yeah.
Totally. And it is the Fellowship and the Sauron character have different abilities, right? The Sauron character is way stronger and way harder, but the Fellowship has more ways to sort of retreat and not be involved in conflict and try to sort of sneak behind. It's fun. I really think you both would find it exceedingly pleasant, a very enjoyable experience. But do I want you to shell out the money for this? This costs more than the 4K Blu-ray did, which already was more expensive than I want to tell Christina.
They could just come over and play our game.
Not in our quarantine zone, Christina.
Well, soon.
We'll have to mask up the puppers. Do they sell those?
Puppy masks.
Dog masks?
Yeah.
Probably. I did a rod starter today. Speaking of dogs.
You did what?
The dog race?
Yeah, I did a rod. The Alaskan dog race.
It's Balto.
What do you mean?
Ever heard of it?
Oh, it's today.
It started today.
I thought you said I did.
I did a rod, and I'm like,
Yes.
what does
I
that
also did
mean?
a rod. I also did a rod.
They're not cultured, Mark. We know.
That's true. Yeah, I know.
But also, I forgot to mention, when Christina was going over the cry count for Return of the King, the cry count, right, as we call it, she did say, and this is one of those conversations after we had the very humorous conversation about ranking the characters in the Fellowship. She said, when you see a horse, do you also start crying?
No, I
And
did
I said,
not,
what?
Kellen. Okay, he's misquoting. I said, well, obviously what I explained to you guys was
Obviously.
the moment where they're charging and everybody's screaming and you can see the horse's muscles and the horses are really trying hard. Anyways, that all culminates in the feeling and the emotion that and the music. Oh my gosh, the music. That's why you cry in the movie. And then I was trying to, because Kellen was kind of laughing at me, and so I was giving him more reasons to laugh at me. I was like, in your defense for not crying, I also cry during horse races, which I don't want this to be in the podcast, Kellen. No, not when I lose a bet. It's because it's the same thing. It's like the horses are exerting all their force and everyone in the crowd is screaming. And as it gets closer and closer to the finish line, people are getting more and more emotional and they're screaming and they're screaming and the horses are trying so hard and the jockeys are trying so hard. And then somebody wins and everybody's screaming. And it's just when you get towards the end of the race, the emotion is so high. Sorry, I'm all high. The emotion is so high that I can't handle it and I get really overwhelmed and I start crying.
Interesting.
That doesn't happen to you guys?
No. I sort of was feeling it when you were talking about the horses running and the emotion swelling, the epitome of natural beauty sort of thing. But you're talking about something else. You're talking about
She's talking about those little jockey men.
Yeah.
Bouncing up and down.
That's right.
No, Kellen.
Just like the hobbits.
Did I mention that I did a rod?
Why'd you bring that up?
Well, it was relevant.
It was relevant that I cried during horse races?
I don't know. I thought it was a good anecdote.
All right, well.
It was a good anecdote.
They didn't even hear the original anecdote
Well,
of the running, of the
who
charging.
could say what he'll use? We're starting a file on you.
That's right.
The cry file.
That's right.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Is there any part of you that wants to play War of the Ring? Speaking of grand thematic gameplay
Sure.
experiences, if there was ever a time in the world you were going to play War of the Ring, I would assume it would be right now, right?
Yeah. No, I would play War of the Ring. I mean, I am open. I'm the most open person that I've met or known, and that includes my parents.
He's in the 12th percentile of openness on the Big 5 personality test.
What?
Yeah.
Did you not hear this? What I said?
Yeah, you were quoting Clark and
No.
Michael.
I was not. I've never quote. Never quote. Everything I say is an original. Yes, I would definitely. I think that my bias would be that I assume that it is not as good as people claim it is because of the sort of licensed addition to it, which is the same thing that I'll say for this.
Sure.
It is a shame that this game is not in mass market because there are a lot of Lord of the Rings fans, and this is an extremely accessible way to get some of that flavor. And I think it would be a great gateway hobbyist game for huge Lord of the Rings fans. And I would gift it to them all up and down town.
All
but
of them.
I'm just not a moneybags person. I don't have the money to do that. You see?
I thought we were getting back to the point.
Well, but then you said that I was the most open person you'd ever met, and then I said, oh, I concur.
And that is Lord of the Rings Confrontation.
So I got a chance to play Reavers of Midgard, which, as we all know, is part of the Champions of Midgard universe of board games. I actually did not know that. I was aware of Champions of Midgard. I've never played it, so take my opinion on Reavers with a grain of salt in case there's any sort of link between the two games that is relevant. But I picked this game up as part of a trade. I wasn't seeking it out, but I had it sitting around for a while and decided to give it a shot. One reason that I had avoided it in terms of picking it up or really digging into it was, I saw the of Midgard part of it. I saw the barbarians on the front and thought it might be like a dice chucky, luckfest, rolly, Ameritrash sort of thing that I wasn't really feeling. And generally I was too big of a fan of. But this was a game that I'd not played, and I made a resolution this year to play my unplayed game. So I pulled it out and checked out the rulebook, and surprise, surprise, it is not at all a Ameritrashy sort of game. It isn't even really pretending to be. It is a Euro-y Euro. It is a Euro through and through. In Champions of Midgard, the main way that you're taking your actions are using dice, sort of a la Marco Polo, but instead of pips, you have symbols. So if you want to go to one part of the board, you have to use, treasure chest symbols. If you want to go to a different part of the board, you have to use shield symbols. So the parts of the board that you can access depend on the die faces that you've accumulated for use at these different locations on the board. It's very much a straightforward Euro, as I've mentioned, and it sort of has a mini game feel in a way. It's got 5 discrete areas on the board where you can go to accumulate cards or quote unquote take over land. Although there is dice rolling, there is a mechanic in which you can conquer things or fight creatures by rolling dice, but it's done in a way that can be very, very mitigated. Basically, whenever you confront something where there's a battle, you can exchange die that have hammer symbols to roll dice to fight it, or you can just exchange other dice to achieve an automatic victory. So you never really have to roll dice in this game at all to fight things. You can always just have the right dice, turn them in, and get the rewards. Speaking of rewards, I think the biggest thing about Reavers of Midgard, the number one takeaway for me about the game, is that, boy oh boy, if you want a Euro game where you get a lot of points and a lot of rewards and a lot of things, it is Reavers of Midgard. This is a game where, you go to a spot, you turn in your dice to take the action, and you take cards, and those cards activate points and activate other cards you can get, activate dice you can get, and a whole bunch of things start writing down on you. That's not to say it's super loose. You will need to keep an eye on your resources, but you're never going to be like more than a turn away from replenishing everything that you'll need. Although it wasn't super loose in that way, it still was sort of a turnoff to me because I got to a point where I had like no dice left to take actions and no meat to go to these different spots and all these things. I was low on everything. And then I would go to a spot and take the action. Then all of a sudden, like, things would chain and chain and chain. And soon I'd have like more dice that my ship could even hold and all this stuff. And I have all these resources and I'd be back to living high off the land. That's not to say that the game isn't well designed. It is well designed. If you're in the mood for a Euro where you're always getting that little like dopamine hit of get something, it works. And I have to admit that I felt that. I mean, it is nice to go to a spot on the board and then you get all these things, and it's nice for that. And I know some players don't like games that are very resource light and you're feeling like you're always scrounging for things. This game, that is not the case, and there is some fun to that. There is some appeal to that type of game. Not a game that I would pull out a bunch of times, but for a light feeling, a lot of resource, a lot of chaining sort of game, Reavers of Midgard does serve a fun purpose in that way.
Do you think that the theme and the color palette and the imagery works in its favor or against it? Does it expand its audience?
I think the art is really nice. I think the colors are very vibrant. So the on-the-table appeal is there. The, like, I don't know what this game is. Like, let me look at the box cover and try to figure out what is going on inside. I think that is misleading, as it misled me, because it purports to be like a big, you've got these brawny people fighting, and you've got sea monsters and all this stuff and going on adventures. And it's a Euro game. It's like a Euro game, and you don't ever really feel like the swashbuckling aspect to it. I mean, it's integrated as well as you maybe can, but I mean, like, for example, to take over land in the game, you have to exchange like 2 meat to take over land. Like, what does that mean? That's like
rations.
Yeah, right. So the thematic ties are a little suspect, but, it's fine. If you can accept that sort of like pasted on theme, it's not terrible. And again, the vibrancy of the colors and the art and all these resources raining down on you all sort of fit together.
I feel like Champions of Midgard, the game that this universe builds on, it has kind of been like pretty loved in the hobby for a little while, and
yeah,
I have not played, and I feel none of us have played it. Did this make you want to potentially think, oh, maybe there's something to that game? I feel like, at least personally, I feel like I've just mentally compartmentalized as something that I don't need to play.
Yeah, I mean, so it's weird because, again, I've played a bunch of games that have been sitting on my shelf unplayed over the last couple months, and I'd say 4 times out of 5, my decision coming away from them have been, this is a game I can get rid of. Don't need it. Look to sell it. This is actually more on the fence than you might believe from the way I've described it. This is actually a game that I feel like I want to hold on to just because of that resource boon. It's a nice feeling to have a game where you're flush on resources without being too loose. I've played games before where you get a lot of resources, and after like the first or second turn, once you get all those resources, you feel like you're set for the rest of the game. There is an ebb and flow in this. You're always going to be able to get back, but you're never like set for the rest of the game ever. So it does make me want to look into Champs of Midgard. If it served the same sort of purpose, if it had the same sort of feeling, then I would say this would be enough. Mm-hmm. But I honestly don't know enough about it to know what to expect from it.
Right.
It comes from, and I'm looking at Neelan when I say this, the Feast for Odin school of Euro design instead of the Agricola school of design.
Oh, because it's about Vikings. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
No, and Christine and I were talking about this over dinner tonight, Neelan.
You had the classic Agricola versus Feast for Odin over dinner conversation?
Oh, God.
Over
again,
the
Helen?
Maruchan ramen.
Over the Maruchan ramen with egg and sriracha. Only Maruchan, never Nissan. No, Christina and I were talking about our oft-repeated topic of objectivity versus subjectivity, and I think that Neelan has a propensity to prefer games where everyone mostly can get their things done, whereas I prefer a game that is trying to stop you and you almost never get what you want to do accomplished. I think Twa is an easy example, and I'm actually really not trying to put words in Neelan's mouth, but Twa is a game where you see the combo, you want to get to the combo, and you almost never do. And similarly, I think in one designer, Uwe Rosenberg, like Agricola is a exercise in what can I get done. And A Feast for Odin feels like most people have a pleasant time when they play it, building their thing, and mostly getting to do the type of things they want to do the whole game.
Yeah, I guess like I would argue that I have a propensity for one over the other. I mean, they're both top 50 games for me. Like, I love that feeling of strangulation sometimes in the right context. But yeah, I think you might be right that given a choice between the two, I would prefer the feeling of accomplishment at the end of the game versus the feeling like nothing quite worked out exactly as you wanted it to.
And I want losers to feel like losers when they have lost. Write that down.
So that is Reavers of Midgard. Neelan, what have you been playing?
So I have been playing Paleo from Hansem Gluck. This is a cooperative game and one that came to my attention during our last Eschenspiel preview episode. It is a cooperative game where you are each controlling a group of prehistoric men. The aim of the game, at least in the context of what your objective is to complete this cave painting, which in terms of the mechanics of the game, you could think of as just 5 cool accomplishments before you get 5 skulls, which represent basically death in your tribe. Every player starts the game with a couple of people in front of them. They have different icons that contribute towards different skill checks. And then you have a deck of cards, which get divided between the players. And on every turn, players will draw 2 or 3 of those cards, depending on difficulty. And based on the back of the card, pick one of them to resolve. I'll come back to what I mean by that in a little bit. But then once you reveal the front of the card, there are a couple of challenges on that card. And that might be, okay, you find a boar. So I'm like, okay, I have some hunters in my group, so I have enough spear icons to be able to kill this boar. Therefore, I will lose some cards from my deck as required by the challenge, get some food to put into our cave, and great, I have now accomplished that task. You sort of keep doing this by wheedling down your deck, going through these challenges, collecting resources, collecting food, collecting wood, collecting stone, because once you get through each of your decks collectively, that's what triggers the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you have to feed all your people, so you have to spend some of that food. You have to fend off animals, so you have to have collected enough wood, for example. You have to protect yourself from the cold, so you have to discard a torch, for example. And that symbolizes the end of the night. Any of these challenges that you can't complete during the night phase gets you one of those skulls, which moves you close towards ending the game. And then you repeat. That's the cycle of the game. You keep going through days, reshuffling all the cards, cycling through them again until you've accomplished your 5 parts of the cave painting. The way that the game evolves over the course of time is that one of the things you're able to do is craft new tools. So these are going to be new ways to get new skill check icons. You're going to be able to get new people into your tribe. You're going to be sort of getting new ideas and inventing new things. But the core of the game, to me, exists in these modules that get shuffled into the deck at the start of every game. So there are 10 of these modules, and each of them have very different thematic elements. So there might be one that represents a snowstorm. There might be one that represents wolves attacking the tribe. And you sort of pick 2 of them, you shuffle them into your deck, and they're going to present unique challenges. You have to have enough torches to fend off the wolves. And then in order to win the game, you must find the cards in the deck that are the wolves that you need to kill in order to accomplish your objective. And that is, I think, where the meat of the game in terms of the interesting thematic elements comes in. This idea that you are working through this deck to find the things that you need in order to complete these objectives. So let's go back to that key decision, right? Which is you're picking between 2 cards based on the back. Why is that relevant? Why is that important? Because the backs of the cards are only depicted by these sort of artistic impressions of that location in the game. So it might be like a forest, or it might be a mountain, or it might be a river, or a campsite. And you kind of have to like loosely decide based on the back of the pictures which of those cards you're going to choose. So, okay, we need wood. So I have a choice between a forest and a mountain. I'm going to pick the forest and hope that I'm getting an activity that's going to get me wood. One of the things that's kind of frustrating about this as a mechanic is buried beneath these are little traps. You might go to the mountains and there's a rock slide, and that sucks. There are some cards that are depicted in the back as just being straight up bad. They're these hazard cards that if you ever discard, you actually lose health for. But some of them are good, so maybe you should just occasionally pick a hazard. I don't know. There's something very weird about that mechanic that I think it kind of feels like the injection of the lightest sprinkling of decision-making that doesn't really amount to much, because it kind of feels a little bit arbitrary a lot of the time. So once these cards are revealed, the decision becomes, okay, which of our cards are worth focusing our efforts on, right? Am I going to choose an activity on my card or forgo it to like help you with your task? So let's say the other player draws like a big mammoth that we can hunt and get a lot of food. And I pick up some sticks to get a couple of wood. I don't really need the sticks this round, so instead I'm going to forego my action to help you with this big hunt. So there are these moments where you sort of come together to work towards big tasks versus choosing between multiple options in your card. And those feel like the key decisions you're making is when to pick certain actions at the expense of cards, because some of these actions burn cards from your deck, which takes you closer to the end of the day. So those are the sort of decisions you're making a lot of the time, but this odd injection of barely hand/deck management based purely on your feel ski of what a card is going to reveal kind of just felt arbitrary. I understand why the game isn't just literally draw the top card off of your deck, because there is an element of like, oh, I have a couple of hazards coming up, so I'm going to choose to save the hazard for later. You know, there is a little bit of that to it, but it's very minor in the grand scheme of things. But I do think that there is something fun in trying to figure out what each module is all about, right? Of trying to go through the cards being like, oh, I get it now. We've now got this tool which we can now use in order to kill off the wolf. So when a wolf comes up and we fail against it, I'm like, okay, I now know what I need the next time this comes around, on the next day. So there's this element of sort of prepping and gearing yourself up for the challenges that are still to come. But I never felt that there were any really strong decisions to be made in this. It kind of just felt like you're going through the motions a little bit. It feels a little bit repetitive, a little bit rote, and a little bit over long, even at 2 players. I think ultimately I felt like it was just too light for most gamers as an experience. I thought it was an adequate family co-op game, but not one that I would necessarily go out of my way to recommend. I think the most damning thing I can say about it is that it was too easy. So even having played now 3 games of this, it was always a foregone conclusion that we were going to win. And I never felt that adding difficulty would have made it better. If anything, it would just have made it more frustrating. It kind of felt like the fun of it was just going through the motions of figuring out how the module worked and then wiping out all those modules and adding 2 new ones for the next game. But the process of playing it just felt a little bit rote and repetitive.
You said that one of the issues of it was that it goes too long?
I think so, because I think that you get to a point, let's say about 2/3 of the way through the game, where you realize, okay, we've only lost 1 skull, we only need 1 more painting. I can see where it is. We just have to get the wood that we need to do this. And then you're kind of just going through the motions of getting through the day, knowing you will get that wood, but then, oh, I lost a person here. Oh, I had to give up some wood over here. And then just waiting for the right card just to end it effectively.
Right.
It never felt like it had the required tension that a good cooperative game should have.
I think we've probably talked about this too much already, but it does sound like this is unlike any other co-op game. Like, a lot of times we tie co-op games to, oh, this is a pandemic-like, or, oh, this is a card game sort of like the game. But this one, struggling to put it in its position.
It sort of reminded me a little bit the way Neelan was describing it, like Friday, which is not a co-op game. It's a solo game, but it's a game where you go back through the same deck of challenges over and over again. Is there some of that?
It's not unlike Friday, actually. That's actually an interesting comparison. I think one of the things that is interesting right off the bat is that Friesen knows how to make that mechanic feel like, I say this a lot, but like mathematically sound. Like you know that it's just right. You know that there's a very delicate balance between the cards you can lose versus the ones you can't.
Yeah, like when you win in Friday, you feel great.
Exactly.
You're always at a crescendo and you're always barely going to make it or barely going to lose.
Right. In some ways, it's similarly frustrating when you lose because it's sometimes just for reasons that you can't help.
Yes.
But
right.
in Paleo, I just never felt that tension. It never felt like the game was running away from me.
Right.
So it kind of dilutes any of the key decisions you're making.
Right.
So I would say like a pleasant, light thematic family game, but probably not one that's going to hold a lot of interest for experienced gamers. And that is all I have to say about Paleo.
Before we go on to our main topic, we want to read a review. As always, one of the best ways to help our show out is to review it wherever you found us, be it Apple Podcasts or our Facebook group or wherever you find us. If there's some mechanism to review us and give us 5 stars or 10 stars or 2 thumbs up or whatever the highest rating is there.
We're almost at 200. I mean, wouldn't it be grand to be at 200?
Wouldn't it be grand to be at 300? You got to think big, Kellen.
It's always been my problem.
That's right. So despite what Kellen said about our review count, I'm seeing here that the review I'm reading from Isla is rating number 224. So we are next up to hit 300. So that would be nice to wake up to 300 reviews. Review number 224 from Isla is titled Nothing Quite Like It. This podcast is by far my favorite. It is filled with all the components of a great show. It helps to fill you in on all the board games you may have missed and, as you say, the latest hotness. In doing so, it also weaves in fun jokes and moments to keep you laughing for days. For days! Laughing for days. I've never enjoyed a podcast quite as much as this. Thank you for making my long car rides and walks home a bit better with each episode. Thank you, Isla. Isla has been a long-time listener. Isla had a little segment on our show way back when, didn't she?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So the only fan, I think, to ever have a segment on the show. So that's rarefied air. So thank you, Isla. And you can be like Isla and get us to number 300 by leaving that review. Isla, as I can see here, has left 5 stars, which is the required number of stars in a 5-star system. So yeah, join the fun and review our show.
Mark would like to wake up tomorrow morning to 300 reviews.
That's right.
So
that's all
I
I'm
don't know
asking.
how y'all are going to make this happen, but I believe it's possible.
Look, my birthday's going to be in, I think, exactly a month from the day the show airs. So it doesn't have to be the next day, but certainly by my birthday. We should have 300 reviews. But let's move on to our main topic, getting out of our comfort zone. So let's start off our discussion by talking about times that we've stepped outside of our comfort zone. So Neelan, when is a time that you think you might have stepped outside of your comfort zone?
One of the things I've spoken about a couple of times was this idea that I wasn't always comfortable with social gaming, and Time's Up and the Resistance did a lot to kind of change that for me. Like feeling like I was in a safe space to like enjoy that sort of game. Whereas prior to that, I kind of, I wasn't familiar with the people I was playing with, etc., etc. But one of the things I think that's still in this ballpark that still irks me a little bit are games that have like role-playing elements. And I went into a demo game I remember this distinctly, the very first PAX I went to of Penny Arcade's Thornwatch game, knowing that this had like these role-playing elements in, but someone at my studio was like, oh, I really want to try this. And I was like, okay. So I sort of went in knowing that I was about to be made uncomfortable. And, the game itself is not something I especially loved, but it has this component to it where if you ever describe one of the actions you're making with like some sort of flair or like some sort of storytelling, like the Dungeon Master equivalent, I forget what their name is, can give you like a reward token that we can actually expend later down the line. So I'm just going there watching my friend going like, oh yeah, I flip out from behind this rock, I sort of take my bow staff, I sweep his legs, and she'd be like, oh, very good, here's this reward token. And I'm just like, now I have to like step my game up. So I'm like uncomfortably going like, oh man, yeah, then I came out from behind the tree and I twirled around a couple of times and I shot him between my legs and it was great. And like, it was just, I remember feeling so like, what am I doing? I hate this. I have to leave. I need to make an excuse to leave right now. So yeah, that's my story. I think what was interesting about that is it in some ways like cemented this idea for me in a way that's probably not been like super great, honestly. This idea that I just can't get on with this sort of role-playing game, especially games that like lean into that element really hard. And that is not like a knock against the genre as a whole. Sure. It's just something about me specifically. Like I just know that they're not super well suited for me. Yeah.
Wait, did you get the reward token though?
I think I did. I did. There was like visible discomfort from the game master. Was like, I guess you get one. No, that didn't happen. but I do think that there was that element of just like feeling like once I had done that once, it wasn't worth doing again. And I just never had any other action with that much flair after that point.
I feel like we all kind of like, this is just not a genre that we have much experience in. And I think we all are kind of like weirdly sheepish about it, unless I don't know.
I think that's probably true.
You're looking at the drama club vice president from high school.
Christina.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is really going to surprise you guys. Because my example of when I went out of my comfort zone was with Meeples on a Map games. Do you believe that? So this is now my probably favorite genre of game. I love these games. There's probably not one that I've played that I don't like. But when I first started playing this genre, and my biggest memory of this was back in the early years of 2015 when we first played Blood Rage. And I had this resistance to one, attacking my friends. I think I would always want to choose the faction or the strategy that was the least attacky because it just felt so bad to me to like kill my friends, you know?
Wow, that's long gone.
I know. Now it feels bad to not kill my friends. So it's really interesting, honestly, to see like how my gameplay has changed because of this genre. And so I think it's just really interesting because I naturally would never have been drawn to this. I'm like naturally very violence averse. I like can't watch violent things on TV. If somebody cuts themselves on accident with a knife, I like close my eyes and cringe and like tell me when it's over. Like I can't, I just don't like that type of thing. And similarly, like I don't like making people sad. And so like it made me really sad to have to attack Neelan. And I would be like, I'm sorry, but I have to, you know? I think like breaking out of that fear of doing those things has literally changed the way that I play games and the way that I enjoy playing games. I mean, it's like some of the biggest moments in my gaming life are playing Meeples on Map games and having those huge attacky fighty moments. And that actually is like all of our friendships are stronger because of those. You know what I mean?
I think it's also fascinating to take Nealon's example and your example side by side, because it's sort of like two sides of the same coin. Nealon's example sort of shows that sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone will reinforce the fact that a game or an experience is not for you. And that's fine. Obviously, there's certainly nothing wrong with Nealon, trying one of these role-playing, gamey, heavy games and knowing for sure afterwards, or not maybe knowing for sure, but having the idea reinforced that it's not a game for him. And then you, on the other side, thinking it wasn't for you, stepping outside and now fully embracing the attacking nature of the game. It's sort of interesting. I would argue both experiences were beneficial in the end.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? The hope is always that you'll come away changed, at least by having done something that you just know the answer to already, right? You either come away with something that you would never have experienced and a new love and a new appreciation for it, or at the very least, you know what, I knew I wasn't going to like this, and now I know for sure that.
Right.
I think both are, like you said, beneficial.
Kellen, when did you step out of your comfort zone?
I think that this is a really interesting topic, as you mentioned, given the sort of year that everyone has been through. I think that the function and nature of board game groups that are comprised of sort of different tastes and flavors and people naturally push you to try things that you otherwise would not. So I really struggled to find something that I would consider a recent example of stepping out of my comfort zone when it comes to board gaming. And then the second factor is sort of the length of time that you spend in the hobby probably cements the guardrails. I've gotten zapped by that one too many times. I'm not going to touch the electric fence again. But the example that comes most to mind for me is having tried playing Megagames twice. We went once at Gen Con, and that was somehow not enough. And then again at Shucks, the last time that was in person, Nealon, Christina, and I played a mega game that was related to the Scythe IP, a fan-made mega game. And a mega game is sort of a board game that's happening while an RPG is happening, and there are 100 players, and there are 12 different factions, and there are people portraying the media, and it really does this sort of middle straddle line between RPG and board game, and I just doesn't work for me, and I'm just so uncomfortable there. One of the examples from the Scythe mega game was, there were inventors who could, for their faction, come up with an invention, literally just write down, it invents gold, and it spits out gold and protects the border, and then they hand it to the moderators, and then the moderators would thumbs up or thumbs down that invention, and then either give it a cost or something, and then just put it in the game. And so literally the rule for that mechanic was oh yeah, give it a try. Yeah, that sounds cool. And my brain just does not, I'm sitting there going this can't be real. What's happening? There's this shared delusion, and I'm not here with them, and I want to be here with them, but I don't know how to be here with them. It's this little siren song, though, because there are 100 people there enjoying themselves. And it's always when people really enjoy something, I want them to take me there, right? Because that's the goal. It's like Twilight Imperium. I don't like it. I really don't. I don't think it's good, actually. I don't think it's good at all, even the 4th edition. And yet, if you tell me your favorite game is Twilight Imperium, and you say, oh, Kellen, you want to play with us? I want to play with you. Because you're telling me that that's your favorite game. Maybe my group just didn't get it. Maybe you're going to be the person that unlocks what's good there. I don't know, and I have not stepped out of my comfort zone very often in the last year, but that was the last big one that pops.
Quick question, Kellen. The other time you guys played a mega game,
yes,
was that as sort of rules light or rules in flux as the Scythe one?
My memory of that one was that a player threatened to quit because I got him ousted out of the UN that he was in, and he had prepared for months to participate in that role, and literally he went to the DMs and got the rules of the game changed because I got him ousted. That's my memory of that.
Was it a Watch the Skies game?
No, it was the first run of a kaiju thing that was, I think, either from the same people or related to. I do think that those games straddle, I know you've done a Watch the Skies event.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The one time I played a mega game, it was a Watch the Skies. I was unsurprisingly the president of the United States, and we had a great time playing that. We actually all got dressed up, and it was a situation where we were just going for that event. So like every other team's nations got dressed up and got really into it. We had a lot of fun there, but it also might have been a function of, and I think there's some rules looseness with all these games because they sort of have to be rules on the fly situations. But it seemed like there was some structure to it, and that might have helped scratch the I want to play a game itch for me.
Yeah, it just gets down to, in that first kaiju game, there was like the UN, and there were like all the countries were represented, but then 4 or 5 of them got like super votes, which represents something in the actual UN.
The Security Council.
But in terms of the strategic implications for the game, it just made it so they were just more powerful than other nations.
Right.
And so we sat there and were doling out money and making choices, and they just literally got better votes than us. And I was just like, so I invented a way to get rid of them, which was not to that person's liking.
I think one of the things that was interesting about both times I've done it was the moderators will often indicate, maybe in the prep and the emails leading up to the event, oh, hey, these are the roles that are more suited for if you're more gamery inclined. These are the ones that are more role-play inclined. But I still think that there is always this awkward blend of there's just not enough mechanical soundness for my taste. So I'll be like half playing the game and then realizing like, oh, wait, we can do that? I didn't even realize we could do that. And as soon as that looseness appears, something in me shuts down a little bit.
Sure. My example of stepping outside of my comfort zone is way more generic than yours. Whenever I have decided to try joining or participating in a game group that I've never been to before. When you're sort of new to the hobby or you've moved to a new area, one of the things that makes board games sort of tough in general is that you need other people to be there when you're there. So that often makes your options limited to either, gathering your pre-existing friends or finding game groups. I've always had a sense of nerves whenever I've gone to a new game group, and I think that's a normal sort of feeling. What I want to sort of talk about in those experiences, especially now that the pandemic is hopefully tailing off and we're going to be able to do more in-person gaming and joining game groups and finding game groups, is just some things I found helpful when it comes to joining pre-existing game groups that maybe you are the new member of. I think the number one thing that has helped me in those situations is, and this is a weird thing to point out as the best advice, is to be punctual. Because where I've had the most awkward experiences were when I went to pre-existing game groups and you get there like 10 minutes late because you don't want to be the first person there, and then you get there and then all the games have already started and you're just standing around either waiting for somebody new to come by and then it's just you and that other person trying to find a 2-player game, or you're waiting for games to end and you're just sitting there like trying to pretend that you're just reading rule books because you just want to sit there reading a rule book of a game that you've never going to play. And so I did that enough times to realize this is a really bad situation to be in. I realized that, if you're new to the group, being there when they start and being part of the whole, okay, we're going to break up into 2 groups of 3 or whatever, and being there from the start is vital. I think that is such important advice to give to people joining a new group.
Mark, let me ask you this. All right. How many game groups have you been to in your lifetime?
A dozen, let's say.
Mark has been on time to events 12 times in his life.
That's right. You just have to be there on time once, and then you're set. I'm not saying be there on time every time. I'm just saying be there on time one time, and then you're locked in.
It's funny that this is your comfort zone example, because I feel like the joke used to be, oh, who knows which game night Mark is at tonight.
Right.
You had all these game groups and we were one of your game groups,
right.
And if you didn't show up, it was oh, he must have chosen his other game group over us.
Which is true usually.
And so I just assumed that it was you just loved meeting new people and it was super easy for you to go to new game groups and it was no big deal,
I mean, I do think that once I'm there, I get over those initial butterflies pretty quickly, but I mean, there's nothing more awkward than being there just as other people have just started playing and you're just the only person there. There's 20 people there playing games and you're the new person and you're sitting next to the table of games and just languishing, just what do I do? How many rule books can I pretend to be interested in? How long is my phone battery going to last? I pretend I'm reading whatever. It's just that can be a really...
Do you do the you go up to a table of people playing and then you try to interject and ask them one question about what's going on?
Oh man,
because I've done this.
Dangerous game. That's a dangerous game to play.
Oh, how does this game work?
Oh, who's winning?
I've heard of this one.
Yeah. I've done this. I'm making fun of myself. Oh, man.
Yeah. So we've talked about the past. Let's talk about the future. What are maybe some things that you're looking forward to experiencing outside of your comfort zone in the future, Neelan? LARPing?
Yeah. What's that?
LARPing?
LARPing? Yeah, why not? I mean, I may as
Go
well
full on.
go whole hog with the thing, right?
That's right.
Like, burn that bridge once and for all.
Maybe it's not the thing that you don't like. It's just like the intensity.
Yeah,
You just need
I
more
think that's
intense.
exactly it. Like, every time I've shown up to these role-playing games, just being like, you aren't big enough into this. Like, where are the clothing? Where are the robes? Where are the wizard stops?
I'm here with my wizard hat.
Exactly. I just have to leave that stuff in my bag because no one else is at my level.
You can reprise the move that you did that one time at that one con.
Yes, exactly. I could
The
jump from behind the rock,
twist.
twirl around, shoot
Yeah.
the bow between my actual robe.
You've got that down, dude.
One of the big examples of a type of game that I think we've spoken about a lot is going fully into like train games. And I think the other genre game that you've spoken a lot about, Mark, that I feel like is something that I've never had that much affinity for is something like a coin game. In particular, I feel that games that have like strong historical themes to them, like actually rooted in historical events, tend to put me off in a way that kind of feels like I'm not someone that considers themselves very knowledgeable about history. It was always my least favorite subject academically. So I always feel like I'm just not going to fit in this if I don't understand anything about the Cold War for like...
Oh, interesting. This is really fascinating to me. So for you, the aversion to playing these games is not that you're not interested so much as you feel like because you're not interested, you might not like sort of quote unquote fit in, or like...
Kind of. It's a little bit of both. It's not being the sort of game that I would genuinely enjoy, but also feeling like I would make an idiot of myself through my lack of knowledge. Like, we're playing Twilight Struggle, and I don't know anything about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a card will come up, and I'll mispronounce a name, something like that.
Sure.
Like the idea that I would just like completely give away my complete lack of knowledge of the subject. But that's something I kind of want to be better about. Like, I think what was being interesting to me is the times that I have explored some of these games and feeling like I've actually learned about a period of history that I didn't know anything about, and then found time to like investigate that separately, has been really, really rewarding. And especially in the 10 years I've lived here, the amount of things that I've like just stumbled into about American history and then sort of investigated separately because I had no exposure to that prior has been really, really, really cool. So I would love to force myself to try that more and more.
That's cool. Christina, step outside the zone.
I think I need to be more comfortable playing more party games. Just kidding. That's obviously not.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I love party games. I have two quick ones, actually. My first one is based on the fact that, as we've probably alluded to, there are 3 really, really good rules teachers in this group. And they are Mark, Neelan, and Kellen. And because of that, I never teach the rules. This is like my game group, so I'm always playing with one of them, and I never teach the rules because of that. And I have a very big fear of like teaching a big group, or even not a big group, even if it was like 3 people. I have a fear of teaching games because I'm just so terrified that I will do a bad job or lead people astray or get something wrong or whatever. And I get like the stage fright is just unreal. And I get so nervous and I forget stuff because of the stage fright. You know what I mean? Anyways, I think that as we move into a world where we're no longer only playing games online and we get to hang out and we are in these bigger groups, I would like to practice that skill and actually start teaching some games, because I do think it's fun to read the rules and learn the rules and then be the one teaching, but it's just like such a fear of mine.
So that's something you would like to get better at. It's not something that you...
I mean, I don't know, kind of.
Yeah,
like
sure.
It's scary, so of course I don't want to do the scary thing, but it probably would be good.
And your second?
Oh, and my second one is solo gaming. I feel like that's something I've always kind of been drawn to. And the only time I really have done any solo gaming is with like Twice as Clever, because it's an app, so it's super easy. But I think there's something very sweet and delightful about like setting up a game for yourself on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Neelan, I might need some pro tips from you and suggestions on where to start.
we should definitely talk. Like, I've definitely got a couple of things I could send you that you might dig. I think something like an Under Falling Skies is something that's come out recently, which is one of the best examples of like a small, accessible solo game.
Yeah.
I don't know thematically if you would love it, but yeah, let me think about that.
I absolutely love the description of setting up a solo game as being sweet. I mean, that's like perfect. Sort of like a self-care, sort of like you're doing this like little piece of art / fun for yourself.
Yeah.
There's a sweet aspect to that. I really like that.
Yeah,
It's really nice.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's something to the process that isn't unlike doing like a jigsaw puzzle, right? Where part of like the catharsis of it is the setting it up and the tearing it down. You know, like it's not just about playing a game against yourself. There's just a procedure.
It's like you guys could not be speaking a more foreign language right now. It's like there's no butter left on our little butter dish, and my day is ruined having to get another one out of the fridge. Do you know what I mean? Like, the physical world, you know, I just wish it, I can't, guys.
You wish that the physical world wasn't
Physical
there.
world?
Wants to live in the computer all the time.
Yeah.
One time we did BarrageCon and we went to Big Bear together and we got there and we were walking around and it was so beautiful and we were all like smelling the pine trees and Kellen looks around and he's like, yeah, it's a nice alpine theme.
That's a private conversation.
Speaking of sweet things, Kellen.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I think that seeing many people enjoy a part of the hobby that you just don't get always makes me like question, like, what about it is it that I don't get? And I've tried to straddle this line. So, you know, Board Game Twitter, you know, Board Game Barrage is on there at BRD Game Barrage. You can follow us. That would be great. But you see a lot of tabletop RPG people on Twitter, and it's sort of like they're almost talked about together, you know, or in congruence with each other. And like in my mind, they couldn't be further from each other. And there's this one tabletop game that I've always been interested in playing, role-playing game, which is Fiasco. Okay. Fiasco is a one-shot, and I think I know what a one-shot is in that there is only one shot, and you don't have to play it over and over again as a story, and it is a game about, it's a dark comedy, sort of like at the end of a caper movie, you know, kind of like In Bruges or, you know, one of those Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrel, where you're all just sort of arguing about who gets the loot, and it's a storytelling sort of narrative game. And, you know, I did, you know, do drama in all of, like, middle and high school and was a big part of my life.
I believe you were vice president.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mark, for remembering. Okay, this is the thing, right? Everyone's experience is different. So sometimes I try to clarify this because people will be like, they have their, like, high school of, like, 40 children. Do you know what I mean? And so then it's like you could be, like, president of, like, 7 clubs, and that would mean very
Nothing.
little.
Yeah.
You know, our graduating class was over 1,000 people. So this isn't like nothing. This is still high school, and I was vice president.
You held sway over a lot of people.
And I did get impeached. Yes, because the drama teacher was not very happy with some of the things that I did. But Fiasco is like one of the premier, like, one-shot sort of always comes up. You know, someone even on our Discord has mentioned that it's their favorite board game of all time. It's not on Board Game Geek, it's on RPG Geek. But I always look at it and I just know that if I had that one friend, you know, who's not Neelan, I think anyone but Neelan, who loved this and wanted to run it, that it would be a experience that I would probably enjoy, and I would be very uncomfortable there. But I would love to kind of get that experience.
So I'm sort of
Yes.
interested because on one hand, I know you're the type of person, as you just mentioned earlier in the show, where like if somebody loves something, you want to connect with that. You want to know why, and you want to be taken
Less
along
of
for a
Marvel
ride.
films.
Right, exactly. The one caveat is no Marvel
Yes.
films. But other than that, that's your thing, which I love. I think that's a great thing that you have. And you have spoken extensively about your experience in the drama club as the disgraced vice president. But I don't remember you often being excited about role-playing aspects of games.
Yes.
But you want to try this. And the thing is, I understand that. I get that you want to do that. But there's just a disconnect there for me. Like, you have a background in drama, but you don't really like playing dramatic games or role-playing games now. But you have this aspect of you where you want to connect with things people love. And it's an interesting sort of dichotomy to me about, like,
He
what...
prefers if you say he has a background in acting
Thank you. No, I think that in some...
or in the theater. It's also acceptable.
I think that in some ways, games that straddle the line. You know, it's like maybe my new hypothesis is that games, as we've talked about, that are sort of like trying to be both don't work for me. But, you know, like there are board games like Once Upon a Time that is literally a silly lark of telling a story and you're playing cards, but the cards don't really matter. And like I always enjoy playing that. I could hate Fiasco, to be honest with you. It's just always been at that sort of like, in my mind, I'm connecting a few things, which is like I always hear about Fiasco from board gamers who like board games that I like. And I'm just seeing so much TTRPG community. It's like this whole other world that's, frankly, it's bigger than board gaming, right? Like we can look at the numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
It's substantially more popular in podcast land, for example.
Yeah.
So just something to try. Like, you know, I want someone to say, Kellen, I've got a version of Fiasco that I think you're going to like. Like there is an element of like, you know, I need to be pulled in there.
Like the cultivated experience.
Yeah. And I don't know. It could be bad. Who knows?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. It's very interesting. I have a sort of similar answer for this question. And I think, again, I probably have the most boring answer. So I feel bad that I'm the one that's carrying the end of it. But I've talked about my 18XX thing where I was hesitant to ever get into it. I thought it was some sort of like sub-genre of board gaming that I would never approach. And it was for like a select group of people. And I would never pierce that veil, for lack of a better term. And so with the possibility of playing games in person and this sort of resolution I've had to play my unplayed games has made me appreciate just trying things. And so one thing that I sort of want to try, which is a similar sort of thing to the 18XX thing, is war games. It's hard because there are aspects of war games that I don't think I would like the whole hex encounter, like the small chit thing is like super visually unappealing, but I think I could get over that. And there's also the fact that a lot of them are very rules intense and long, and those are aspects that I wouldn't really want to try. But I'm sure it's such a big subgenre of gaming that I'm sure there are games that fit for me. And there's a sense in me that like I want to try things, because if I don't try them, then I'm never going to get around to them, and it may be something that I really, really enjoy. I mean, there are some things like role-playing games where I've played role-playing games. I've played a bunch of role-playing games in the past, but I know where I am now, it's not something I'm really into, and so I don't really feel any draw to that. But I want to try out these genres of gaming that...
You're going to try everything once, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got to dip your toe. You got to dip your toe in the various pools.
Zest of life.
That's right. So yeah, that's just something I would like to try out.
You have to use those little suction things, too.
What do you call... Oh, sucky things, right?
Yeah, sucky.
Suckies, yeah. Gonna have to call Andres for that. So that is going to do it for our discussion on stepping outside of your comfort zone. Why not go to our Discord and into the podcast channel where we discuss the week's episode and tell us about times that you stepped outside of your comfort zone or things that you're maybe interested in trying now that we can be playing in person again.
Maybe going to the Discord will be stepping out of your comfort zone.
There you go.
Right.
Actually, every time I talk in Discord, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone because I don't like talking online. It makes me anxious.
I also think that that's not uncommon. Like, if you look at the number of people that join the Discord and don't end up saying anything, like, and I think that's a totally fine way to use that platform, right? Is to just take in what you're experiencing. But
yeah,
definitely, please take this as your opportunity to step outside your comfort zone and say anything. Like, the community is so friendly, and I feel like the more you do it, the more you engage with it, the better it will be for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What he's saying is, if you were looking for a sign, this is your sign.
This is that moment.
That's going to do it for our show. As always, you can find us in all forms of social media. You can find us at BoardGameBarrage.com. You can join our Discord, as previously mentioned, at BoardGameBarrage.com/Discord. In case you're looking for math trades, our math trades are kicking back up. We just wrapped up one, and so another one's going to be starting soon. That's at BoardGameBarrage.com/trade. Leave a review. Get us to 300 by my birthday. That is the goal. So that's wherever you found us. Leave a review. Again, 5 stars, 10 stars, 2 thumbs up, whatever the highest score is what we need. And as always, a big thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? And that's going to do it. Till next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. But how about this? I told Christina that I was not feeling too up for the episode because I have a very important work week as a busy professional. And she said, well, we could do it without you.
No, actually, I said, well, I could just replace you.
Yeah, she tried to like subtly slide that in. Like at my darkest moment, she tried to go, yeah, we could repeat 139. And that firmed up my resolve real quick. Sobered up.
It really did. Well, first of all, there was no quaver in my voice. And second of all, he went from being like Eeyore to like studying and prepping for the episode to make sure he could be better than me.
It had to happen.
Helen, you already got in trouble for that.
I know, that's why we're not saying it. What do you mean?
What do you mean? That's why you just said
I'm
it.
trying to
That's part of the
get the
black
people
tape.
going.
It's part of the Kellen black tape that I'm accumulating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like he wants you to have a black tape on him, huh?
Right. He knows. He knows the deal we struck.
It's expensive.
Maybe now that we're starting anew, you could restart your attitude.
Oh,
Excuse me? I think I've been delightful on this episode. Who have I offended? Lord of the
not
Rings
offended?
fans?
A lot of horses, for one.
Jockeys.
Don't you remember our hundreds of horses that we
Frodo.
love?
Yeah. Well, Frodo, he just belongs in that tier, Neelan. All right, I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Getting out of our comfort zone.
It sounded like you were about to start a bedtime story, like getting out of our comfort zone. One day, Neelan woke up and it was a rainy day. And Neelan hates rainy days, so he went back to bed. But Mark came in and said, Neelan, it's okay to do things you don't like. That's called getting out of your comfort zone. And it's good for you. Change is good. The end. And then, and then Neelan said...
Neelan learned nothing from Mike.
Yeah, Neelan stayed in bed. Mark continued preaching to him. Nothing happened.